Hello, this is the Arizona Department of Health Services. We're just testing the audio. Are you able to hear us?
Yeah, I can
Yes.
hear.
Yep.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
Fabiola, are we going to get this going?
So in just a moment, this is Kim Crawford at the Department of Health Services. We're just waiting for one more member to join. Right now, we have 8 and we need 9 for quorum.
Cannot hear you.
Oh. That's a problem. Thank you.
I can hear you for what it's worth.
Come on, Steve, comb your hair or
Come on
something.
here, Steve.
We can hear that too, Steve.
Hey then.
You're the host.
I know.
This is worth coming up here for that.
Get to see the inside, where all the fun is.
Okay, welcome everyone. Can you hear us?
Still cannot hear a thing.
Can anyone else hear us?
Yeah, I think everyone
I
else.
can hear.
Everyone but Steve.
Your sound's clear.
Okay,
Chat.
I'm asking Megan too.
Okay.
okay, welcome everyone. Hopefully all of you can hear. If you can't, send us a note and we will try to see what we can do from our side. Welcome to the September 22nd Medical Marijuana Testing Advisory Committee meeting. Thanks for taking the time to join this Friday. I'm going to go through and do a quick roll call. Should introduce myself. I'm Victor Waddell with Department of Health Services here. We'll be chairing the meeting today, and I've got Megan Whitby here as well with me, and a group of other folks in the room that we'll hear from as we go around. So I'll start off with the roll call. If you could unmute when I call your name and let us know that you're here, I will document that. I'll start with Maxwell Lung, who I can see in the room. Murray Stein, who I can see in the room also. Ryan Hurley.
I saw him on the screen.
Ryan. Are you on? We're looking for you. Yes, we can see you on the screen, so we know you're there. We just can't hear you. Okay, we'll take it that Ryan's there because we can see you on the screen. Ryan Tracy,
Yes, I am present.
okay, thank you. Steve Cottrell,
We know he's there.
yeah, we know you're
but he's
there,
having
but you're probably having problems responding to us, or if hopefully you can hear us.
They just resent him the link, so hopefully.
Okay, hopefully you can join. Okay, Matt LaScala,
Yep, I'm here, present, thanks.
thank you. Andrew Provencio. See Andrew there?
Man, nope.
Okay. Joe DeMena, do we have Joe? I don't see him either. Okay, don't see Joe, okay. Jay Neary, don't think I see him either. Jay? No, I don't see him. Vincent Figuarelli?
No.
I don't see Vincent either. Vincent? No. Okay. And Sean Guashong?
Here.
Okay, thank you. And I think I seen Victor Hugo Romero Sanchez.
Here present.
Thank you. Ty Garber. Ty, I don't see you on the list here, but maybe you're there, Ty? No, I don't see Ty. And then we've got our vacant positions, and I think that's everyone, right?
So if we can get Steve Cottrell on the line and he can hear us, then we would have 9. And that would be quorum with you.
Yep. So should we give him just a minute? See
Yep.
if we can get Steve online.
Perhaps just a suggestion, trying from a computer to a mobile device. If you're on one, try the other. Perhaps the audio would work better on one versus the other. Just a suggestion.
Okay.
Okay. Steve, can you hear us?
I can. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Present.
We've got a quorum, so we can move ahead. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. So I'm going to go to our first item on the agenda. Hopefully everyone has a copy of it in front of them, which is to review the committee's charge before we get started. So the charge is that the committee or the advisory council shall annually review the marijuana testing programs under this chapter and chapter 28.2 of this title, and on or before the second Monday in January of each year, the committee shall submit to the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Health and Human Services Committee chairpersons of the Senate and the House of Representatives and the Department of Health Services. They should submit the report that does not disclose any identifying information and includes at least the following items. Firstly, an assessment as to whether an analyte should be removed from the required statutory testing panel. And secondly, the number of statements of deficiencies relating to testing that were issued to each nonprofit medical marijuana dispensary, third-party independent lab, marijuana establishment and marijuana testing facility in the preceding year, also including the remediation efforts made to address each deficiency and the resolution of each statement of deficiency. The information may not disclose any identifying information, but shall delineate the information by entity. And finally, any other recommendations should be submitted on ways to improve the testing programs. And so just as a reminder, we are in an open meeting, so we may only discuss items that are listed on the agenda that you have. You can request items be added to the next agenda for the next meeting if you like. Please do not make comments in chat where possible. Raise your hand and we will call upon you to ask your question. And once a motion is made and seconded, we will vote on that motion before entertaining another motion. So thank you again, everyone, for joining today. We'll go ahead and move into our first item here on the agenda, which is Delta 8 and Delta 9 and potential related testing. And I believe Steve Cottrell is going to talk on this one. Steve, can you hear us?
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, thank you for your time. Yeah, Delta 8 and Delta 9 have become a serious issue within this industry, being produced and sold outside of licensed locations. And upon further investigation into what I've discovered, this is more of an agricultural thing that is going to be governing this and not the Arizona Department of Health Services. Since the department doesn't have jurisdiction over smoke shops, convenience stores, and different retail stores like that. So I don't know if there's a whole lot that this committee can do in regards to those types of facilities. These products are not being tested through licensed entities here in Arizona. I was hoping that we could maybe have some type of oversight, overreaching, and allow them to, or mandate that they do. But again, upon further investigation through legal means, and I've discovered that the department doesn't have any reach over this and can't really do anything to mandate testing on a product that is manufactured and overseen by the Department of Ag.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, we got a question from Joe. Could someone unmute Joe so he can ask his question?
Hi, everybody. Thanks. Just a quick question about what Steve mentioned. While we don't necessarily have anything to do with the Delta 8, Delta 9 situation, couldn't we as a group make a motion to just make a recommendation, because there's a report that goes to the legislature and the governor that some sort of action be taken by the legislature? Is that within our scope?
So the scope again is related to the testing of medical marijuana within our licensed marijuana program. So I don't know that there would be anything, I mean, it would have to be related to medical marijuana testing or adult use marijuana testing.
To improve the existing program, is that right, Mary?
This is Megan, but yes, that is correct.
Megan, sorry, yeah.
That's okay.
Anyone else? Any additional questions or comments? And Joe, I still see your hand raised, though that's maybe from your question a few seconds ago. Unless you.
I'm sorry, I don't see it up anymore. My apologies.
Okay, we do have a question. From Jean Guachon. Can we unmute him so we can listen?
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering if since for those of us who are online, if you guys are presenting and there's some materials, like whether you can share it online so that we can actually see it and maybe you can understand everything better.
We will absolutely do that. There were no materials submitted for that last agenda item. That is why nothing was presented.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments or questions for Steve?
Just out of curiosity. So if this is not the place to talk about it, then what is the state jurisdiction that would cover this? I'm just curious,
As Steve mentioned, the Department of Agriculture is the body in Arizona that regulates the industrial hemp program. And so if anyone may have some jurisdiction, maybe there, it's also possible, to talk to your legislator or I know Andrew Provencio had a topic on the agenda for advertising related to the Delta 8, Delta 9. Those are things that, there's many sources out there that may be the place to go, such as the Attorney General's office and things like that. It's just not something that we have jurisdiction over here. Absolutely.
Megan, they don't have an advisory committee group that you're aware of, or?
I think they do for the hemp program. It's just, and I don't want to speak to them because I'm not an expert there, but the last that I knew, they had certain license types that they gave, including a processor one, but they haven't really taken a regulatory stance once that's finished and once it's out on like the store shelves and stuff. So that was the last I know.
Last bill that failed 4 or 5 months ago, that would have remedied some of this. Is that correct? To your knowledge?
I don't think I can get into that. No, I'm not allowed to speak to that.
I know it spoke to Delta 8 and a few other topics. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this is very frustrating for the industry as a whole, because this has essentially taken the dispensary monopoly and opened it up to the rest of the world. And I know that dispensary owners are not happy about that. As for the industry, for me, I think that, understanding the different chemicals and the different components that are involved in these products and making doing these conversions of Delta 8 to Delta 9 are what's the scary part. We don't use these chemicals in the cannabis industry, and what they're doing is they're using some serious chemicals in these products to do the conversions. And they're far more harmful to the human body than anything that we have ever produced or ever could produce in this plant that we manufacture.
I think that may be true, but I mean, it just doesn't fall under our purview. It just isn't something that we can address. It's going to have to be in a different.
Agreed. Yeah.
Hey, I do have one question that I think this would fall within our purview. Could we make a recommendation that all testing identify converted oil in the market for the medical market, meaning anything that's Delta 8 and Delta 9 must be identified for medical patients and for the medical program?
Would that help force the adult use side of things, maybe nudge them forward, since we're looking for the rules to overlay?
You guys are completely, you have the ability to make recommendations for all of our testing, both medical marijuana and adult use, just to clarify. So you do have that. It's just, I believe what Steve was really bringing up is the products that are out there outside of our licensed facilities outside. And so we can't, that's outside of our purview. We can't require testing of products that aren't being sold in the medical marijuana dispensaries and established in the adult use establishments.
That's correct, Megan. Thank you.
Yes.
But Joe, you could definitely make a suggestion that many of us will support, where we combine medical and adult use, and to address the converted oil that is being made and finding its way into this marketplace. I think.
Yeah, I
that.
would like to make a recommendation, basically exactly like that, because I think there's a transparency aspect here as well, based on what we don't know about these converted hemp derivatives, and especially for some medical patients who just want to be completely aware of what they're putting into their body. I think it's important. So
if there is a motion someone would like to make today, we just need to have it very clearly established what that motion is, or is it something that you want to bring more materials to another meeting to have a motion? So that's kind of where we are now. If someone would like a motion, we just need to have it very clearly laid out what it is.
So I think it would make, I'm sorry, go ahead. But I think it would make sense for us to do it on the next meeting and maybe bring in an expert to talk a little bit more about about what the motion needs to be. That's sort of my thought on it at this point.
It's
I
also,
agree.
sorry, Steve, it's also really helpful, guys, if you have well thought out things and like potential proposed motions that we can actually add on the agenda ahead of time, so everyone has time to look at those, and the public as well, who might want to attend these meetings, can see what those proposed motions may be.
So one of the things that we need to address is what chemicals are we looking for in the residual solvent analysis? What are those chemicals that they are using to convert these cannabinoids, Delta 9 into Delta 8 or into Delta 10, into all of these things out of hemp? Those are the chemical conversions that we need to understand to start looking for in the residual solvent analysis, so that we are able to determine whether or not these products are in fact hemp or are they cannabis, which clearly will not contain any of those products in there, contain any of those solvents in there. So we need to, as a community here on this board, ask all of our testing companies to find out what those molecules, what those chemicals are. I know there's several laboratories listening to this call. We need to understand what those chemical conversions are, what those chemicals are that they're using to make those conversions.
Yeah, Steve, just to, I mean, that's like kind of a Pandora's boxing. That's going to be a mass overhaul. So probably not something we would exhaust all the time of this call, even digging any further into that. That's going to be tons of compounds.
But that speaks to the urgency of and the danger of these products that are in the marketplace that you, me, and everybody else out there is having access to, unbeknownst to unbeknownst to ourselves.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's not due to time, and it's not something we're supposed to be covering and addressing. So hoping we can cover the things we can address.
Yeah, my only suggestion is that outside of this meeting, we do a little bit of homework and ask our local laboratories, what chemicals are they using? What chemicals are you looking for? And just really start to hit all of those laboratories, those licensed labs out there that perhaps are doing that testing. Ask them for help so we can make this a better, stronger industry, to expose those players and get rid of them.
Hey, Murray, you had a comment?
Yeah. Is there any reason to believe that some of the folks that do processing to develop Delta 9 may also be developing other products that would be sold in our industry?
Absolutely.
Then there could be a safety concern about contamination on those pieces of equipment, because consequently leading to those chemicals that we're not currently testing for to be present. So is the route here, aside, and I agree with doing the background research, to perhaps ask the labs to test for one or more of those chemicals and possibly even Delta 9, since you're not naturally going to see that in cannabis. Or Delta 8, pardon me. Thank you.
I think that's the goal, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing we can do. We can make a motion that we test for more analytes. If that passes a motion and it's adopted, that's one way to help drive it, because the rules ultimately are meant to come together at some point. It's going to take some time to get there, but I think given the nature of the MTAC's charter, other than using the Arizona Dispensary Association and writing letters to our congressman to try to revive legislation that could help with this, that's probably the best path forward.
So I think that's what Steve Cottrell was meaning to do, but I think he wanted to do some more homework about what those analytes would be, those additional analytes, so that we have more detailed information for a motion. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve.
You are absolutely correct, Megan. Thank you for identifying that.
Okay, well, I think we know we're gonna add that to the next meeting agenda, and hopefully Steve and others can come forward and suggest some folks who can bring more information to the group here. Any final questions before we move on?
Just make one other comment. It's interesting. There's been some recent news media about, and I forget exactly which state it was, but I think it was the Midwest, where they recalled product. I believe it was cartridges of some kind, because they're able to do tracking through metric back to the source meds and found out that they didn't come from a legitimate source. You know, that's one argument for where metric or tools like that can make a big difference in terms of that tracing back. And ultimately, I think that's what we need to expect from whatever regulations we develop in the future.
Delta 8 drive a lot of the Midwest ham production, both in state and out of state, actually really massive.
Okay, great. So we've got that noted. It'll be on the next agenda. And our next item is Delta advertising, and that was by Andrew Provencio, and I don't see Andrew on the call, so I think we're just gonna have to move along to the next item, which is retesting pathways, and Murray Stein and his folks are gonna talk a little bit about this. And I believe you've got a presentation, Murray?
Well, I have a presentation and also a document. The presentation wasn't able to make it into this session, so we're gonna leave that for next time. That presentation will be about sampling, both edible product as well as cartridges, concentrates, and flour. We are of the firm belief that we have an opportunity to use the tables and the guidance within the rules now to actually get where we need to go. And we wanted to provide examples of that for each of these. We did a bit of background research as well to understand the typical batch sizes for those as well. So we'll present that to the next meeting. This particular item I want to present is something that was this is a white paper we produced, one of our tech staff. We've been trying to understand the variability of cannabis for a long time in our testing. And as an edibles manufacturer, it's particularly challenging because we do not specifically go with just whatever the testing results come to us. We have to build products with packaging and labels and all of that sort of thing that takes some significant cost. So there's a lot of money at stake when you make an edible product. When you produce your flour, your concentrates, whatever, you may have targets, but you're selling whatever you're testing produced in that product. In the case of edibles, we have preconceived notions on a part of the consumer where they're looking for the 100 milligrams represented by an expensive label on a piece of package and so on. And when we fail to hit those numbers, the remediation is expensive and not convenient and impacts supply chain. So again, lots and lots of costs for this. So the way we've always understood the statute and the rules reflected essentially the ability to retest until very recently where we started to hear that individuals in the state feel like retesting is not an appropriate approach for edibles. And that's totally ignorant of the realities of edibles in targeting a label claim, shooting for that, and then not having the ability to validate the testing results that come back to us. And I got to tell you, if you're plus or minus 20%, and they are, the labs are, we have lots of data to show that. It's a reasonable number. It's very hard when those numbers can be so variable. So we spent years working with a variety of labs, developing an understanding of their protocols and so forth to be able to understand what it takes to meet those goals. What do we need to do? What does our lab need to do? The paper we're presenting here is essentially a statistical analysis using Friedman statistics, which is a relevant statistical model to demonstrate based on some test data that we did for a number of batches of 3 different products, including rice mellows, caramels, I believe we also tested, and what was the third one, Brandon? Brownies. So we did a number of tests with a variety of labs just to see what the variability would be. And this white paper reflects it. And according to Friedman analysis, it's one way statistically to argue for why there should be a retesting path for products. So for potency, pardon me, for retesting for potency specifically. Thank you for helping with that. So I invite you to read this, look at it from your perspective. I'm looking forward to Steve Baker's feedback, to be honest with you, because, you know, he likes math. But it is a statistical argument for why retesting paths should make sense for potency. And we're going to continue to advocate that the state understand the distinction between edibles and these other inhalable and related products. Oh, motion. Stand by, Megan.
Can I just piggyback to support what Murray's saying there, if you don't mind?
Please.
Yeah, so you know what Murray's saying is really bang on. That is quite a burden to take on from an edibles manufacturer standpoint. And one of the agenda topics that I'm going to hit on a little bit later when we talk about the issue we're dealing with kind of potency tampering or inflation or manipulation, when you're dealing with that in a market-wide, and it is a market-wide issue, it's a nationwide issue, to ask these edibles manufacturers to achieve a plus or minus 20% when that's difficult enough to get the homogeneity and variability down pat, on top of fighting the variability you're seeing within the labs themselves and the lack of enforcement and kind of the broad time frame of which some of these labs are able to operate within the market as they're not nailing down these potencies. It is like, I can't imagine how hard it is, Murray. So my heart goes out to you, because that has to be next to impossible to navigate all that. And I can't imagine the financial burden that does put from a labeling and packaging standpoint. So just to tack on that.
Brian Tracy has his hand raised. Oh, sorry.
That was, yeah.
Sorry, my bad.
So further to that, I'd like to make a, is the radio station on here? What is it? For medical? Yeah, it's 370. All right. So I'd like to make a motion that we can use section 317.01C for a retest packaging pathway for potency. And that's under the medical rules. Adult use also is 310, section 310. Was that clear enough, Megan, for a motion?
Give me 1 second and I will read it back to you. Sorry, guys. Okay. Okay, so please, Murray, correct me if I'm incorrect. The motion, I believe, is to allow retesting for potency according to the procedures outlined in AAC R9-17-317.01C and R9-18-310.
Yes, that's correct.
I'll second.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
Ryan Tracy.
Ryan Tracy.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Okay, any questions before we take a vote or comments?
Are you repeating the motion, sorry?
Yes.
To allow retesting for potency according to the procedures outlined in Arizona Administrative Code R9-17-317.01C and R9-18-310. Those are our rules in both medical and adult use that allow, if a lab fails a test for any particular analyte, that they're able to follow that path to get retesting to see if they actually passed with 2 additional labs. Right now, the rules don't allow that for potency because we don't consider it currently how the rules are as a pass or a fail.
Murray, were you looking to make that exclusive to edible and infused items? I wasn't clear on that.
My pain point is edible and infused products, but it may well apply to others. They'll need to speak
Well,
up.
we just may run into potency shopping on the flour and concentrates, whereas the main pain point, I think, is more relevant to what you're talking about.
You are correct.
Agreed.
I would be comfortable to restrict that to edibles if there was no other objections.
So to
Can we
allow,
revise that motion if no one objects?
we haven't voted on it, so we're gonna start over, Murray, so.
So it would be that to follow the guidance provided by the sections you mentioned, 317.01C and 310 for retest pathway for potency of edibles.
Okay, just to make sure my wording is
I'm sorry,
okay.
let me qualify, edible and infused products. We don't want to leave our friends topicals out of this. They often get forgotten.
Sure, they appreciate it.
Okay, so to allow retesting for potency of edibles and infused marijuana products according to the procedures outlined in AACR 9-317 -17-317.01C and R 9-18-310.
That's correct.
So Murray has made the motion. Ryan, are you still seconding that?
Yes, I second that.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. And Sean Guashong, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Kind of get clarify that is rate testing in two different labs, right?
Same sample.
Is this the same sample rate testing in two different labs?
Yes, so those procedures require that the remaining sample be sent to 2 additional independent labs for testing of the analyte, or in this case, potency.
So the assumption is the first lab made error or didn't measure the potency accurately.
It allows for the possibility of that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions before we vote? Okay, all those in favor of this motion, please raise their hand.
We have Maxwell and Murray in the room. I see Ryan Tracy, Steve Cottrell,
Victor Ramirez
Victor.
Sanchez, yep. Got Joe, yeah.
Joe. I did not have Joe. Okay. So
Okay, with Victor, Joe, Jean Chua, we have Steve, we have Matt, and then Murray and Max.
did Matt Lascala as well? Okay.
Yep.
And
And I don't think I'll call for any opposed, which I don't see.
maybe Ryan Murray. So everyone can take their hands down if you were voting yes. Ryan Hurley, can you tell us if you were voting yes or no on that one?
Yeah, it's voting yes. Sorry, I had to read.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Okay, it's unanimous. Motion approved. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Murray. Okay. I think we're ready to move on to our next item, which is serious repeat violations for labs and enforcement for labs and the enforcement pathway. And Ryan Tracy was going to speak to this item. Ryan?
Yes, thank you very much. And please, for the group, if anybody needs to correct anything that I'm sharing that may have changed in the last 2.5 months or so, I haven't been as closely plugged in the last couple months, but as I understand it, and as it has been for quite some time, we have the annual inspections of labs. We have more and more labs that have opened here in the market, which has obviously added to the competitive nature of the different lab services. One of the things that I am concerned about, however, is when we have labs that have repeat violations or egregious violations of the nature of, an integrity or potency manipulation, or some of the things that we've seen is in the past, these labs, some of them as much as 6 months or more, have been allowed to continue to operate, and many of them without the knowledge of their clients. Whereas I do understand the audits are made public, they are available to the public. I don't know if there is a vehicle in which it is communicated to all of the different manufacturers and licensees out there that these products or that these issues are occurring in these labs and they're under investigation or they're facing enforcement. So really, what I'd like to do is open that up for any discussion if someone has to add to that, and then to make a motion to allow for immediate enforcement, immediate notification, so that we can really clean up and make sure that the brands aren't extending themselves to liability by working with labs that are doing nefarious things, and also by nipping it in the bud immediately so that the other labs in the market that are really serving their clients and doing it correctly don't have to continue to compete with some of the folks that have proven to be repeat bad actors, if that makes sense.
And thank you, Ryan, and I will let everyone else put in their thoughts there. Just as you're considering any potential motions, you may want to consider that that would likely take legislation. You guys, you can make those kind of recommendations. You're right, this report does go to the legislature. I just wanted you to keep that in mind as a motion. You may want to think about it legislatively as opposed to rulemaking.
Well, can we clarify though that the Department of Health Services does have the authority to take enforcement action against laboratories, right?
We do, but we have to follow certain processes that are outlined in Title 41, which give appeal rights and those types of things. So some of what you're discussing there would require legislation to.
Okay, well, even if this just pushes the ball moving forward to differentiate between what would be a legislation fix and what we may have the ability and power to work within the existing framework, I think it's worth the discussion. It's worth being on record, and it's worth kind of getting the ball rolling.
Absolutely. And like I said, you can still make the motion. It could still even be included in the report. I just wanted to clarify what we can do rulemaking wise versus legislative, what would take legislation.
Fair enough. Does anybody have feedback or additional concerns or kind of from your perspective as licensees?
I have one concern that I would like to address, and I don't know, I think Megan's probably going to say exactly what she just said, but it's all, you know, great that the laboratories are held to this standard. What about the dispensaries that are held to this standard? Because they're not. Why aren't we getting reports on dispensaries that are bad players? This is complete. This part of the industry is completely wiped under the rug.
Well, that part is legislative, Steve. So there actually is confidentiality when it comes to the licensees for, and correct me if I'm wrong, DHS, but labs are not covered under the same confidentiality as the licensees for retail and dispensaries. So your violations are presented in a anonymous fashion, whereas we can be identified and singled out. So I think it's just kind of the nature of how that is presented. But to your point, there's absolutely bad actors on both sides of the aisle. I'm just wondering, you know, from our charge, if we can at least address that side currently.
I would just like to see what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I'd like to see dispensaries held to the same level of transparency that the laboratories are.
Well, you know, and Megan, that's a good question. So I think in 2020, we had legislation that by the end of 2023, we were to have true seed to sale with the intent of having that visibility. Am I making that up in my head and just getting this mixed up? Or wasn't there legislation that we passed in 2020 that it was at the end of 2023, true seed to sale visibility?
It did not pass.
In 2020, Steve?
Yeah, it did not pass.
I thought it did. Okay,
Hey guys,
maybe.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Okay, so there were a couple of things brought up there. One was the seed to sale things. Certain things did pass in 2021, it actually was. So by the end of this year, and those requirements were for adult use establishments. And we do have changes going into the rules for chapter 18. And I don't want to get too off base because I know I'm not supposed to be talking about this right now because it's not on our agenda. My attorney's giving me the dirty look. So,
sorry, shouldn't have brought it up.
But anyways, so a lot of that information will be required. They have to have the QR code, and then the testing results and certain information has to be available. And it does require that establishments they acquire their own seed to sale system. It didn't require that there's like a department mandated seed to sale system that everyone has to use, but every establishment has to use one. Okay, so that's
okay. If nobody else has feedback, I'm prepared to make a motion and keep it nice, clean, and tight for you, and make it quick.
Did you want me to address the other thing about what's available information?
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead. My bad. I was just trying to get you out of there.
Thank you. So yes, there are some confidentiality provisions for medical marijuana dispensaries. However, adult use establishments do not have those. If you go to www.azcarecheck.com, all adult use establishment statements of deficiencies, enforcement actions, all of those things are up there. There are some up there related to testing deficiencies and things like that. So whenever we are putting out any kind of information, we are trying to be as transparent as we possibly can. We are not siding with one over the other. We are only trying to get the public the information that they need in case they may have a product that may have failed testing. And again, Fabiola is going to talk about this a little bit later on about what some of those pathways mean. But a lot of times what happens is we get information that a dispensary or an establishment was given a C of A that showed they passed testing. And then it turns out there was an issue with the test results. And so they unknowingly sold test product that may not have passed testing to the public. In those cases, we have to issue a recall. We can't wait for them to do the second and third retest because there is a potential public health hazard, and this is the Department of Health. And so in those cases, we do out of an abundance of caution, and we word those releases just that way. We've never had a report from any of these that we know of someone actually becoming ill, and we put all of that out there. And then the dispensary or establishment has the opportunity to pursue those retest pathways. And if they do get 2 passing test results, then we do issue another release that corrects that. So I jumped ahead in our agenda, but I just wanted to clarify that. And all of that information, we do take enforcement action against the dispensaries and the establishment, just like the labs. I can't even tell you, I don't know off the top of my head how many notice of intent to revokes that we have done against dispensaries and establishments this year, but it is more than a handful. Like the labs, they have all those due process rights, and we can sometimes settle in a settlement agreement and things like that. And if it's on the establishment license, those are public record. They are posted on AC Care Check. So I just wanted to clarify that, and now I'll turn it back over to you, Ryan.
Okay, anybody else in the group have additional things to contribute, or else I'll make a motion?
Go for it, Ryan.
All right, I'd like to make a motion that the Department of Health Services explore within the rule framework or sussing out whether it is a legislative fix on an immediate enforcement action on annual inspections of laboratories, and to have immediate public communication of laboratory violations that are egregious or in the nature of integrity nature. So I really want to summarize that, but that's what I'm looking at. Did I do a terrible job with that? Do I need to redo that whole thing?
It's not that. We're just gonna need a minute to.
No, I know, I get it. I can ramble on too, so tell me to redo it if you want me to. I think you understand what I'm trying to do.
So quarantine.
Yeah, Steve, do look into that 2021 legislation, because I think there was some key additions that will help, I think, a little bit in this area. I don't know if it'll be a fix, but help. Visibility and nothing else.
Yeah.
Was there certain times you want this immediate enforcement action to be taken?
Within 30 days.
But I mean, for certain violations or just in general?
No, for repeat and serious violations. So those violations that are, you know, like the potency tampering with results, those type of things.
I think you probably need to define repeat and serious violation, because those are pretty vague.
Well, I think Department of Health Services defines those. I mean, repeat is obviously repeat. Serious, I think they have a level of how they define the nature of the seriousness of the offense, if I'm not mistaken.
Hey, just want to jump in here. Ryan, I 100% agree with the intent of where this is headed, although I do have some concerns with sort of the due process aspect. And I'm also a bit concerned, unless this is clearly defined and really kind of, you know, fully baked, this could become a competitive tool that some labs use to kind of blast each other. So we just need to make sure that we're very careful with this motion.
Yeah, I mean, and this is purely a tool for Department of Health Services. Labs have no control over this. This is what the Department of Health Services finds in their annual review. They'll determine what's repeat and what's you know, an egregious or serious violation. It's just, and I'm going to give you an example. We have a lab out there that's now operated for over 2 years and has paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines and have been caught for faking results, faking at the time of inspection. I mean, just horrendous things, and they have tested thousands of products for patients over the course of the last 2.5 years, and it's been allowed to happen. Lord knows what kind of liability that could potentially expose us to. That's just an example.
Understanding that, I think though, and Megan, Gang, correct me if I'm wrong, any Arizona citizen can make a complaint to the Department of Health in sort of this realm, right? And you guys would have to investigate it, or is that purely specific?
Yeah, they can go
to
on the
dispensary?
website and file a complaint, and they'll follow up. Yeah, they do have
So
that.
that's
program.
kind of my point right there, is that
But
anyone
they can
could
use
make a
that now,
complaint.
Joe. They can do that now. I could file all kinds of anonymous complaints,
But
or
there
not
would be
even
a due,
anonymous.
but there would be a due process, correct? There'd be a time frame. They would have the chance to talk to the department, as opposed to directly going to the public and saying, or however you want this to be, broadcasted. I'm just saying, I'm concerned that it could be used for bad.
Yeah,
purposes,
you're
that's all.
100% right. We'll have to be tempered in the approach. I think more of my concern is that I just want to see the outcome of it being more immediate, so that there's more protection afforded to the consumer, patients, and then, just the
Totally.
market as a whole.
Yeah, agree.
Okay, Ryan, I think you've got a question or comment.
Yeah, it was kind of along the same lines. I'm concerned about the vagueness of the language, and so I'd like to hear it reread as tight as possible before we can vote. So I think maybe it might make sense to table this and wordsmith it, or Ryan to revise it and make it slightly broader and less specific, just with the intent behind it, because I'm concerned about the specifics and the implications of due process when it comes to the vague.
Sure. Let me go and fix the motion, and
language.
then let me fix the motion, and maybe we'll set all that at ease real quick. So I'm making a motion for the Department of Health Services to explore its ability within the rules to lessen the time frame of which it enforces rules that it finds to be of a serious or repeat nature. So let them determine that time frame. Let them determine the due process. They have guidelines for that. I'm simply saying that the conversation's got to start, because when labs are allowed to operate for multiple years while they continue to do this, I mean, it's obvious it can't continue to happen.
So would you say it one more time for me, just how you want to word the motion? Maybe I could try to word.
I would like to make it a motion that the Department of Health Services explore its ability within the rules to expedite the enforcement of repeat and serious violations of state certified laboratories.
Okay, I think that's much better.
Yeah, that was a good rebuttal there.
Okay, it's just trying to.
It only took me 33 times, but I got it.
You got it though. You got it.
Thanks for working with me, group. I felt the support the whole time.
And Jean Guachong, did you have another question while Megan's completing the typing of the motion?
Well, I have the same question. I think the motion, the new motion that was just presented is much clearer and more defined. So basically, it refers a lot of specifics to the original document, the health department document.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm almost there, guys. I'm almost there.
Any other comments while Megan finishes the motion here? She'll read it in a second.
Okay, and again, just in the future, it's very helpful if you have thoughts of motions you would like to present, if you can give us at least a draft of that ahead of time, just because we want to make sure that we get the wording just right for all of you and that everyone has time to consider those things. What I have, and please, Ryan, tell me if I am incorrect or everybody else, it was that the motion was to direct ADHS to explore its ability within the rules to expedite the enforcement actions taken against certified laboratories for repeat and serious allegations. That was it.
Serious violations.
Violations. Thank you.
Yeah.
So if the intent was to enforce the rules, would be a time frame helpful?
Well, that's why I'm trying to leave it to Department of Health Services so they can work within their rules, because I think that's what was giving some people some angst, is that there wasn't clarity on the length of due process and the ability to everyone to get a fair shake.
But they could take 2 years, for example.
Well, that's what we're trying to eliminate. That's what I'm saying. So no one wants to go too short, but the whole problem is we're going way too long. So hopefully the big brains at that table can figure it out, or at least make a recommendation.
Is 3 months reasonable time frame? Everyone?
In my opinion, I think that is, but that's not up to me.
So just again, to clarify, within current, what we have to abide by in statute and in Title 41, the due process rights that all licensees have, a lot of that time is outside of the department's control, because any action taken against the license, we have to provide those appeal rights where they can request an administrative hearing before an administrative law judge at the Office of Administrative Hearings. And
Is
so
there a way though to shrink down that time frame when it is of a serious nature, whereas maybe it could be, expedited when it's something that, could jeopardize health or safety?
How about temporary suspension is different than revocation?
Yeah, but temporary suspension, that's ugly. You're getting in there. So I'd like to stick with my original motion, because that was clear enough for the group, and hopefully that at least gets that ball rolling, which was my main outcome, my main intent.
okay, do you want me to read it one more time for everybody?
Please.
Direct ADHS to explore its ability within the rules to expedite the enforcement action taken against certified laboratories for repeat and serious violations.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We have Ryan who proposed the motion. Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
We had Maxwell in the room here second.
Perfect.
And then I'll ask for any more last comments or questions before we take a vote. Okay, we're ready to take a vote. Okay, so all those who are in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. We've got Murray in the room, we've got Maxwell in the room, we've got Joe Demena, we've got Jean-Hua Chong, we've got Victor Ramos Sanchez, we've got Steve Cottrell. Let me see if I can see who else we have.
I'm sure Ryan Tracy,
Ryan Tracy, we have, yep.
I do in fact support it.
Ryan Hurley, I saw. Matt Lascala, I did not see.
Yeah, I'm in support. I'm having trouble finding the hand raise button. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, that is
So that's
everyone.
everyone, so thank you. Motion approved and passes. Okay, we're ready to move on to our next item. So next item, Fabiola will be discussing and showing her presentation of the quarantine and recall flowchart. I believe it's up on your screen.
I stole her thunder, but she'll go through it more thoroughly. I'm sorry, Fabiola.
Okay, so I guess we can summarize what Megan said. So when the department hears of possible contamination, or so we either get some information, or when we're out in an inspection, we realize that a product has possible contaminated testing results, or testing results that reflect a possible contamination. If while we are there and it has been sold or is available to be sold, we ask that that product be quarantined so it isn't sold to consumers from that point. So as soon as we're notified, and this is kind of like when in doubt, quarantine. So whether we are going to be provided further testing that shows the product isn't actually contaminated, or if it is, we're quarantining it at this point. From there, if all of the product is fair and they can show that the retesting actions in table 3.1 or other proper retestings, as in our 317.01C, are met. If that we identify that the product has been sold to consumers, that is when we issue a voluntary recall notice. That's when we make a public recall notice and distribute it to the news media. From there, if there's any contaminated products still, they have to forgo proper retesting and procedures. So either way, if product is sold or if it wasn't sold, if it was just going like between different cultivations, you'll end up here where you have to retest and properly test where you meet all of the testing requirements. And then this, and that's from 2 different.
I don't understand what you were saying. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
So the department is aware of a product of possible failed testing. From there, the product is quarantined if it is at a place where it can be sold to consumers. If it's at a cultivation that's not being sold to consumers, consumers do not buy from cultivations. So they would have to provide adequate testing to show that the product meets the testing requirements, whether that be a retest, if maybe the testing results that they presented us at the time were just the final testing or the microbial testings or something wasn't tested and they are able to provide that additional testing, then that product will eventually have complete testing. So this flow chart was trying to highlight the difference and why some products are quarantined and why some go all the way through the recall process.
Understood.
And it's all based on sales to consumers, as far as going from quarantine to recall. And recalls, I think there's been a lot of confusion because we have rescinded some recalls, but that is based on, we issue the recall on an abundance of caution until we can get those 2 tests back that show that that product was remediated appropriately, or that the initial negative test was incorrect at the beginning.
Okay, it looks like we have some questions. Joe? Joe, if you're speaking, you are muted.
Unless he might still have his hand raised from the vote. We'll move on to, let's see who else we have. Ryan Hurley. Ryan, you've got your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm also having difficulty with the button. Not so much a question, but I do know that this is a confusing and a process that of course everybody wants to make sure everything's safe, but I know not so much from me specifically, but from others in the industry, that they are very concerned about the messaging and the effect on their reputation and their brand name when these things are communicated and there's not a lot of context provided to consumers. And so I don't know if there is if I have any specific suggestions, or if there is something that the department could look at in the way that they communicate these that might alleviate some of those concerns.
We've worked very hard to make sure that the messaging places no blame on anyone, and that it very much assures that it is a voluntary recall process. If you have suggestions, we're always open to those. It's just, it really boils down to whether or not the product is in the hands of the consumer or not at the time that we find out that it may have failed test results. If it is possibly out in the public, as the Department of Health Services, we have to notify the public that there is a potential issue. So we absolutely understand and don't, want the negative impact that this can have on the industry, but we have a duty to the public to ensure that that information gets out there. Again, if it's not in the consumer supply chain yet, we don't have to notify the public of it. But again, we're always open to suggestions. It's just a matter of, though, can't go too far in some of those things. Yes.
Yeah.
So I had a question. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide some suggestions to this. We tend to deal right in the weeds with this stuff day to day, so I think we may have some thoughts that will help you. One item on the far right, if you could bring that back up again. Far right box, second down, there's a reference to DHS will issue public recall notice and distribute to the news media. I believe this approach is the same approach that's used overall as a process, regardless of whether it's a safety consideration. In other words, an analyte that's not been tested properly or something else that's showing up in a product. But it gets applied to the edible world as well. And the problem is you get that item 2 that you'll issue a public recall. Well, by that point, you've damaged the reputation of that supplier. So you want to tread lightly there. In other words, that party should be informed. We've had multiple circumstances happen in recent months where, not as a result of safety, but to be perfectly blunt, the inspector was patently wrong about something they told that dispensary. It caused the products, several $1,000s of products to be pulled off the shelf, placed in quarantine, and then reputationally, it was very hurtful for us. Not only that, but we lost thousands of dollars of product, thousands of dollars in potential sales revenue, plus we had to waste the product. And that was because one inspector did not know what they were talking about. So we want to be very careful. We want to make sure that there's an back and forth with the state and us if a recall is necessary. And if it's a safety consideration, it goes without saying. But what about those circumstances where it's not? So we want to get this right, is what I'm saying.
Hey, can I add to that really quick? I mentioned this in a previous meeting a while ago, and I really appreciate you guys showing us sort of the pathway of how the recalls come to be. Just echoing all the concerns of everybody, that for especially a patient and a customer, brand reputation is important, and trust in that brand, and anything that shakes that obviously is going to be something that needs to be examined. And I know this might sound a little bit ridiculous, but I think the media is partly to blame on this one because, they're always happy to cover the recall and, sort of the house is on fire. But when, it turns out that it's all clear, there's not a peep from them. So just something for us to consider as well there.
It sounds like we're wrapped here on that one. Megan, I did want to point out that we did misspeak in the motion we made. It's 311, not 310. So.
Would you like to make a motion to correct that motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to correct the motion. This is one that Ryan Hurley will want to sign up for because he comes from the legal world. So I'd like to make a motion to correct that prior motion in reference to using sections 31701C and instead of 310, adult use 311 as the rules applying to a retest pathway for potency.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that. That's Ryan Hurley.
I'll just be quick. Is anyone opposed to this change in the motion? If you are, raise your hand, please. And Joe, I see your hand raised, but it's been raised for a while, so.
Yeah, sorry guys. It's shown as not raised here, so I don't know what the issue is. My apologies.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no one opposed, Megan, so we're good to make that change.
Perfect.
Motion approved. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to our next item, which is Fabiola again on review of the medical marijuana testing advisory council report.
This report was looking at testing related citations pulled from January 1st to August 31st of this year. So in this one, there are 78 testing related citations, and there are 42 different licenses that were cited with at least one testing citation violation. The top citations for the establishments remained exactly the same as last time. There was a couple of shifts within the top medical testing citations compared to the last MTAC report. So this one had 78 testing citations. The last MTAC report had 40. And there's 42 licenses on this one, and the one of August had 29 license citations. But that August one that we looked at last month was pulling dates from January 1st to July 19th.
And these are all testing violations found at dispensaries.
Dispensaries and establishments.
Okay.
And there wasn't any more enforcement than last time.
And just to clarify, those enforcements are ones that have been completed, so it does not include anything that may be in process right now.
Correct.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
yeah.
The establishment, that's really just a adult use facility, is that correct? The definition? And the inspections that take place, because I would venture to guess, with the exception of the most recent licenses, including especially social equity, that almost everybody that was a marijuana dispensary before is now a dual license. Would they be reflected here as dispensary or establishment?
It depends. So we do have a rule for dual licensees in chapter 17 that says if a violation is a violation of both chapter 17 and chapter 18 at that retail location, that it is on the chapter 18 statement of deficiencies. So if it's the exact same, it would go on chapter 18. However, if it's a violation that is only on the dispensary license, then it gets reported there.
Do you have any sense of how common the issues are across both versus just one?
Fabiola is in the field much more than I am, so I will.
How often is the issue the statement deficiency related to both the medical and the adult use side versus one or the other?
When it comes to testing, I think it's probably going to be almost 100% of the time, just because now that they do match. We used to see a difference, and there used to be some on the chapter 17 side because we didn't have aspergillus testing in chapter 18. But now that they're all required in both, probably most of those chapter 18 violations are dual. I mean, it's the same, you guys know, it's the same products being sold for the most part to both to patients and consumers. So
if we had any bad actors in the dispensary space, they're probably going to be reported through from the adult use side as well, and therefore there would be a public record.
it is very likely.
And then this is just the charts that you summarize the findings in that list view that you guys were looking at.
So these are the most common problems or common issues?
Most testing related citations.
Is this a complete list of those or just the most reported?
They're all of the statements of deficiencies that have a testing related citation that have gone out from January to August 31st. So they're all.
So on the back side is the actual rule reference and then number of times.
And then just to clear too, one thing to keep in mind is on these reports, you see, sorry, on the reports, you know, for laboratories, every citation is going to be listed here because everything they do is related to testing, as opposed to on the dispensary and establishment side, this is not a complete list of every citation that the dispensaries and establishments have received, because they do a lot of things, they're licensed for a lot of things that don't directly involve testing. This is only the testing violations. So that's something to keep in mind about the number of citations on the two.
Well, thank you for that, Fabiola. I don't know whether to be excited or worried.
Any final questions for Fabiola before we move on?
My only statement would be, I wish we could identify the dispensaries so we are able to have more optics into who those bad players are.
Okay, thanks for your comments, Steve. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Getting towards the end of our meeting, so I guess the next item is a meeting wrap up. So thanks again, everyone, for joining today. We have two motions that were approved. I don't think we need to, or three, sorry. I don't think we need to read them all again, unless you have final questions.
Otherwise, we will make sure they're posted along with the recording of the meeting. And just housekeeping item, we are getting close to the end of the year, and I know people tend to have holiday plans and stuff, so I think we'll try to get dates to you for October, November, and December very quickly, because of course we have the report due in January, and then we will try to continue meeting regularly throughout the next year. We have the report due. I know that there's still a lot of topics that everyone is interested in continuing beyond that. So we understand that, and we'll continue looking to get meetings going early next year. But we do have to get the annual report for this year wrapped up in that December meeting.
Well, hopefully we'll get quorum. So anybody that
working
wasn't
on-
here today, anybody that was here, put the shadow on them, let them know they need to be here.
We're working to fill those vacancies as well.
No pressure.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining today and being with us, and thank you for all your comments. We appreciate them, and I'll give you a few minutes back in your day here. And everyone have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye bye. Thank you.